Okay. And just a reminder, you're still under oath.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Nelson. Sure.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hey.
We'll get started while my computer resets. Hopefully it'll work in time. So, Ms. Scurry, you testified that you have been a 911 dispatcher for approximately 7 years at this point. Is that correct? And I just kind of want to roughly go back over, you described sort of 4 areas that you do, correct?
Correct.
So as I understand it, the first area is there are days or shifts where you have, you may be the actual call taker. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so as a call taker, a citizen calls 911, you pick up the phone and respond to whatever that call for service is. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then you'll type it into a system. That information will get sent over to a dispatcher, correct?
Correct.
And the dispatcher is the person who is in charge of communicating with and assigning officers to calls, correct?
Correct.
And there are days when you show up for work and you're assigned to be the dispatcher, correct?
Correct.
You also described a third part of your job is to be the fire dispatcher, which is separate from police.
Correct.
Now, in preparation for trial, I believe on March 2nd, you met with members of the prosecution team, correct?
Correct.
And you made a statement, apparently made a statement that police is more fluid than fire. What did you mean by that?
Correct. So when fire calls come in, let's start over. There are most generally not times where the fire department comes upon an issue. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen where we can assign a rig that's come across someone who might be down on the ground or anything like that. But when a structure fire comes in, it's not because they were out driving around. It's because someone called soft flames or smoke, whatever prompted them to call. And then we send the rigs to where they need to go.
Okay. So basically, whereas police, they may be driving around and they may just see 2 people fighting on the corner, stop and have to deal with it, right?
Correct.
And so dispatching to police officers is a different process than dispatching to fire.
You are correct.
All right. So we've got the call taker, the dispatcher, the fire dispatcher, and what was the 4th aspect again?
We call it our Channel 7. It's an information channel. We mainly use it for officers coming in for off duties.
Okay.
Or when someone reports a lost child, we have different computers that we use to make sure we can log them appropriately in our national database.
Okay. So the Channel 7 responsibilities may include, when you say off duties, those are police officers who are hired as security at local businesses, things of that nature?
Yes.
So even though the officer is not on duty as a Minneapolis police officer, a business hires them and they still act as a police officer, correct?
Correct.
Now, and then there are those the lost children, things of that nature.
Yes.
Right? You also described that the city of Minneapolis is comprised of 5 precincts, correct?
You are correct.
First precinct being downtown, is that correct?
Yes.
And downtown is broken into 2 sectors, correct?
Correct.
And then you have the 2nd precinct, which is the northeast, right?
Correct.
The 3rd precinct, which is the southeast, right?
Correct.
The 4th precinct, which is the North Minneapolis, northwest side of the city, right?
Correct.
And the 5th precinct, which is the southwest side of the city.
You are correct.
All right. And each of those 5 precincts, like the 1st precinct has 2 sectors. Mm-hmm. The 3rd precinct, you said, had 4 sectors, right?
Correct.
And so essentially, there would be 2 squad cars downtown, 4 in southeast Minneapolis, and that's the totality of the police force in those 2 parts of the city. I mean, as far as patrol.
Patrol. At certain times, it can be more. It depends on the shifts and when they're on.
So there may be an event or a concert, and they may bring in extra people, or something's going on where they would need extra officers?
Correct.
And oftentimes, there are fewer officers than are assigned sectors, correct?
There's usually always at least one squad per sector.
Okay. But those, like, officers call in sick or they go on training, and so the numbers of officers on the street at any time shifts from time to time.
Correct.
And it's fair to say that as a dispatcher, you're not a police officer, correct?
Correct.
You have not been through the police academy, through police training, things of that nature.
Correct.
But you don't know all of the police officers in the city of Minneapolis, right?
No.
Okay. Now, in terms of your previous testimony, you indicated that listening is a big part of your job.
Yes.
You said that the majority of your job is done by listening. Can you explain what you mean by that?
We are in a room with no windows. We work off of a phone and a radio the majority of our time. The other times would be only if we had some kind of video to show us, anything like that. Then other than that, we are always on a phone or radio.
Okay. Now, you said that there are 6 televisions, you believe, in the dispatch room. Is that right?
Throughout the whole center, there's 6 on the walls, 2 large ones on the ends, and then there's 1 in fire.
Okay. So
9 total.
9 total. Sorry, I had to do some quick math. And I'm just trying to get this set back up here, if I may have just a minute, Your Honor. There we go. Okay. Those televisions don't have the City of Minneapolis cameras up all the time, do they?
No, they do not.
Those televisions may have other information up. They may be off. I mean, they're not constantly on all the time.
They're always on, but you are correct. They're not always on cameras. We have other information that we put on those screens that we can have constantly running as reminders. We also have other screens that we utilize throughout the day, too.
All right. And then in front of you, you have 4 or 5 different computer screens itself. It sounds like it's a very, moving job, right? Now, you testified that it's very rare that you actually see an incident that you've dispatched on these city cameras.
Correct.
Does it happen once a year? Like, is this the first time you remember it ever happening? How rare would you say it is?
I can't be specific, but there might be, in the whole time that I've been a dispatcher, maybe 3 to 4 calls that I've seen on our TVs.
Okay. And usually, correct me if I'm wrong, the reason that may be brought up is because there's something that triggers someone to operate that camera and put it up, right?
Correct.
So you don't control the cameras.
You are correct.
You don't have access to the cameras through any of the screens in front of you. Is
Correct.
that right? Someone else who maybe like a manager or a supervisor has to do that?
Correct.
All right. But this incident was specifically brought up on the cameras, right?
Yes.
All right. Now, I got this all. You also were previously interviewed in connection with this case by Special Agent Brent Peterson. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that was back on June 9th of 2020 at approximately 1 o'clock, right?
Yes.
And that was at the FBI field offices, or where was that?
It was over the phone. I was not in town.
Okay. So you had a phone interview with Agent Peterson, and I believe you had your union lawyer or something with you as well, right?
Correct.
Okay. So you, on May 25th, you were Channel 1 dispatch. That covers both the 2nd and 3rd precinct, correct?
Correct.
And there were, again, the 4 sectors of the 3rd precinct, Squad 310, Squad 320, Squad 330, and Squad 340, right? And you didn't necessarily know who the officers were assigned to those cars.
Correct.
Have you subsequently learned who the officers were who were assigned to those squad cars?
Yes.
So who was assigned to Squad 320?
Officer Lane, and I do not know how to correctly pronounce the other officer's last
King.
King.
All right. And squad 330 was Officer Chauvin and Officer Tao, correct?
Correct.
And the other cars did not come, right? Squad 310 or 340 were not on scene, right?
Correct.
And ultimately, 830, did you identify who squad 830 was for the park police?
I didn't.
Now, when this call initially came in, you again were not the call taker this day. You were the dispatcher, right?
Correct.
And so the call taker comes in, takes the call. You see the information that the call taker puts into the computer system, correct?
Correct.
And it's fair to say that that information is also being seen in the squad cars of a Minneapolis squad car, right?
Correct.
So when the call taker types in this information, it's visible to the officers in the squad car.
Yes.
And it allows them to respond as well. You can respond. Lots of people can respond to various calls, right?
Correct.
All right. I am going to go back to, with the court's permission, I believe this was Exhibit 151, which was the computer-aided dispatch.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see that in front of you?
Yes.
All right. Let's see if I can get rid of some of this stuff here. All right. Okay, so the call initially comes in at 8:02 and 13 seconds, correct?
Correct.
And as you described, that the caller reported that outside the reporting party that there is a male provided a counterfeit bill to the business. Suspect is a black male, 600 plus, that means 6 foot or higher.
Yes.
Okay. Sitting on top of a blue Mercedes-Benz ML320 with the particular license plate. And it also noted that it appears this person is under the influence, right?
Correct.
So at the time that the call came in, you would have seen that this person was suspected to be under the influence by the caller, right? As would the officers in their cars.
Correct.
And so you indicated that you had initially did you say you radio dispatched Squad 330 to this call?
Initially, yes.
Right. And that was because, and do you recall where they were at the time you dispatched them?
No.
Excuse me. Back in June 9th, when you spoke with Officer Peterson, or Agent Peterson of BCA, would you dispute me if I said you told him that they were at the precinct at the time of the call?
I would not dispute you.
Okay. And so it's, at that time, you believe that Squad 320, which was the sector car, was tied up, but they had not cleared something from the computer? Is that right?
Right. They were still on the call that they had been working on.
So let's talk about when an officer finishes a call. Is there something that an officer is supposed to do to say, hey, I'm done with this call, I'm on to the next one?
It is, they can either clear over the radio with us, clear me, whichever report, advice, sent, whatever. There's a multitude of things. Or they can clear themselves. On my screen, I have a status screen that shows me when a car is clear, when the car is en route, when they're on scene, and when they're code 4.
Okay. And so on one of these screens that's right in front of you, you have some sort of representation of each of the sector cars that you're responsible for dispatching. So if, for example, you have a call in Sector 310, and 310 is already occupied with some other call, you can send 320 or 330 or 340, or even somebody from a different precinct or sector, correct?
From a different precinct, it requires more conversations with a sergeant to pull response cars. It's a policy of calling people and getting their permission to use their cars. But yes, if someone is busy and I don't have a 360 or whichever precinct 60 car to use, then I have to go to the closest available. Or if there's no one who's close and I only have one squad available, that's the person that has to go.
Okay. So when you are looking at your computer screen, do you see all of the precincts' cars and their availability, or do you only see the second and the third precinct
I only see the second and the third.
Okay. Now, so you indicated that ultimately Squad 320 kind of took the call back, right?
Correct.
They said, hey, we're clear. We're going to go handle this call at the Cup Foods, right?
Correct.
And you're familiar with the, you said you were familiar with the 38th and Chicago intersection?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And does it get a fair number of police calls to that area?
That I don't have the statistics for.
Okay.
And I wouldn't be able to rattle off of a yes or a no.
Okay.
In the last year, yes. Before that, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Okay. Now, Squad 30 was ultimately Squad 320 was ultimately backed up with Squad 830, the Park Police, and Squad 330, Officer Chauvin's squad car, right?
Correct.
And again, do you recall why you backed these officers up?
Initially, I believe I heard a loud something in the background. I would have to be reminded of what exactly I heard, but it was loud. And so until they were code 4, I started a squad to back them.
Okay. So correct me if I'm wrong. You can't just hear what an officer is doing at any given time. Listen in on their calls, right?
No, they have to radio us to let us know what's going on.
All right. So when an officer pushes his button on his radio, or however they do it, it opens up the air or the microphone, so to speak. And that's what you're talking about. You're trained to listen, right?
Correct.
And when you spoke with Agent Peterson, do you recall telling him that you heard lots of yelling and things of that nature at one point when Squad 320 said they were taking one out?
I don't remember specifically. I believe I told him that because that was the reason why I asked for assistance.
Right. Squad 320 didn't call in and say, hey, we need help. You heard something that was concerning to you, and you sent help.
Correct. And then when they said they were taking one out, had they said that first, I would have also started it then.
Right. And so Squad 830 was the first to respond?
Yes.
And I believe that they responded, let's see, at 8:10 and 38 seconds, right?
These actions right here, the one with my numbers where it says backed up with 320, or 320 with 330 and 330 with 830, that is me using my tools at dispatch to just back them up. I don't see the arrival times on here.
Okay. So this, you see here, 525 at 20:12:21, 320 C4. That's code 4.
Correct.
Meaning all clear, right?
To my understanding, yes.
And then 830 out with 320 at 20:12:55. So roughly 40 seconds or 34 seconds later, Squad 320, or excuse me, Squad 830 is out with 320,
Correct.
right? And then there was an inquiry to get some information, right? And ultimately, then at 8:20 and 11 seconds, there was a code 2 call for a mouth injury, right?
Correct.
Meaning, code 2 again, meaning just come in the matter of due course and no need to rush.
Routine, yes.
Routine, right. And then at 20:21:35, so again, about a minute and 24 seconds later, Squad 330 EMS code 3.
Correct.
So someone assigned to Squad 320, either Officer Chauvin or Tao, called EMS and stepped them up to code 3.
Squad 330.
Squad 330, right, which
Correct.
would be Officer Chauvin or Officer Tao.
Correct.
All right. And they, code 3 means get here as quickly as you possibly can, right?
Correct.
Lights and sirens.
Correct. Sorry.
Now, this particular document, Exhibit 151, does not have the arrival times, correct?
Not printed on it, no.
All right. Are you familiar with other documents or other printouts that would show various arrival times?
Yes.
And it would show other people who are associated with the case? Like what time, like who is assigned to which particular squad car?
Yes.
Okay. If I may have just a minute, if we could take this down, Your Honor. Mr. Frank, I'd be referencing Bates stamp 7438 for your information. Would it refresh your recollection, or would it help you to identify arrival times if you were to look at what's called an incident detail report?
Yes.
I'll ask you if you can show this screen to the witness. This hasn't been offered, Your Honor. I'm sorry?
I can't kill those screens, but not that one.
If I may have a minute. All right. Now, the incident detail report has a much more detailed time of like first keystroke, of when somebody starts typing, what time officers arrive. Every single time is documented very closely, correct?
Correct.
Now, would you disagree if I told you that the phone was picked up from the 911 caller at 8:01 and 15 seconds?
I can't disagree with that.
Okay. And I know that you don't have this right in front of you, but because of some redactions, I just have to walk you through these times.
Okay.
Would you agree or disagree, or would you agree that the first unit was assigned at 8:04 and 28 seconds?
Yes.
And that would be squad 330 was en route at 8:04 and 28 seconds.
Correct.
Then 320 took the call at 8:05 and 11 seconds and indicated that they were en route. So very short time, right?
Very short time.
Would you agree that if I told you that squad 320 arrived at Cup Foods at 8:08 and 10 seconds?
Correct.
Squad 330 being assigned to Derek Chauvin, Tu Tao. Squad 830 being assigned to Peter Chang of the Minneapolis Park Police. Squad 320 being assigned to Officers King and Lane.
Correct.
Now, in terms of
We're gonna go back to old school methods and print out some paper. We'll get there.
To your honor.
To them to speed this process up.
Mr. Nelson?
That's fine, Your Honor.
All right.
So for purposes of stipulation, EMS code 2 for a mouth injury was called at 8:20 and 11 seconds. EMS code 3 from squad 330 was called out at 8:21 and 35 seconds. The arrival time of EMS is 8:28 and 36 seconds. Am I reading that correct? So 8:28 and 36 seconds EMS arrives, correct?
Correct.
All right. And then EMS didn't stay on scene, right?
No.
They left. And they indicated that they went to 36th and Park, right?
Correct.
And they didn't go to 36th and Park, did they?
EMS? That's where I believe they were.
Okay. So to your belief, they went to 36th and Park because that's what they called out, correct?
Correct.
Do you recall fire having trouble finding EMS at 36th and Park?
Yes.
Okay. Because they didn't go to 36th and Park, they went to 36th in Chicago, correct? Or do you not know?
I actually don't know. After those comments, I did not know that's where they went.
Okay. So ultimately, there was some confusion between fire and EMS about where EMS actually was. And you heard that radio chatter.
I asked the questions on Metcom, which is reflected in there, and then relayed the information that I had of 36th and Park, which was also added into the call. Other than that, I didn't know their locations.
Okay. Now, ultimately, you said that you were watching this video, and you were still watching your rest of your work, right?
Correct. I was actively still working.
So you look up for a couple seconds, look down, do your work, look up, look down, from time to time throughout the course of this incident.
You're correct.
All right. And so it's fair to say that your attention wasn't necessarily focused directly on the cameras and what you were seeing.
Correct.
But it was concerning enough to you what you did see that you called Sergeant Pluger of the Minneapolis Police Department 3rd Precinct, right?
I was concerned. Yes, because of the time of the length of the incident had not changed.
Okay. So you called, we listened to your video, or the audio of your call with Sergeant Pluger, and you called Sergeant Pluger at 8:30 and 44 seconds.
Is that the time of the call?
Correct. 20, 30, 44.
Yes, and that's the first time we spoke.
So the first time you spoke was at 8:30 and 44 seconds. And in fact, during that phone call, you must have looked back at the camera and saw that they were all gone at that point, right?
Correct.
Because you said something to the effect of, oh wait, they're all gone, right?
Correct.
And your time that you had called into the MetLink was at 8:31 and 12 seconds. Does that sound right to you?
For the Metcom hail?
Right.
Correct.
Then ultimately, Squad 330 indicated that they were going out to check on the status, and it says AP of the AP. That's something that Squad 330 typed into the system,
Correct.
and that was at 8:55:08, right?
Correct.
Now, again, you were concerned because of the length of the time that you saw this incident unfolding, right?
Correct.
And I think you said that at one point you thought maybe the camera had even frozen,
Correct.
right? Because it seemed to be kind of prolonged, right? You can't hear anything on that video, could you?
No.
You had no idea what officers were talking about amongst each other or what they were talking about with others who were present, right?
You are correct.
And again, you, not being a Minneapolis police officer, are not familiar with the use of force requirements, correct?
You are correct.
All right. But you are aware that when uses of force are made or used, sometimes you'll hear dispatch, the officer call for a sergeant because they need someone to review a use of force, right?
Right.
And you, at the time you called Officer Pluger or Sergeant Pluger, you hadn't received any sort of a dispatch from Squad 320, Squad 330, or Squad 830, hey, we need a sergeant to review the use of force.
You are correct.
Now, every single time the Minneapolis Police Department uses force, do they go through the dispatch process?
Of over using the radio,
Well, to get to the sergeant to report the use of force.
as far as I know.
Okay. So you don't know whether someone called up Sergeant Pluger on his cell phone and said, hey, we need you down here.
Correct.
And so, because at 8:30, when you called Sergeant Pluger, you had not yet heard that dispatch, right?
Correct.
And sometimes when a use of force incident occurs, that call may be to the sergeant to review the use of force, may be fairly quick, and sometimes it may take a few minutes, right?
That's true.
And
Yes.
it just depends on the circumstances and the situation, right?
Correct.
All right. Now, you indicated that there were these TVs. There are more cameras within the city of Minneapolis than 6 or 9 TVs worth, right?
Yes.
Are the televisions, are they split screen where you can see 5 or 6 cameras at one time, or is it one big TV with one big camera?
It is split screens, and then you can go into different camera views.
Okay. Just looking back through my notes. When you watched the video here in court, you said that it was similar to the video that you had watched previously, right?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that the video that we just watched in court seemed to be moving very slowly in terms of kind of choppy
Pace.
pace?
Yes.
Right. So an incident that you watched it in real time, subject to a few seconds of delay for the signal to get through, right?
Correct.
So I'm going to see if it makes a difference if we look at it on my computer. If we could, this is Exhibit 11. Yep, it should be plugged in. Can we put it up? There we go.
Once it wasn't me.
It's day one, Your Honor. So. All right. So now when you watch the same video, it seems to be moving in a little faster time.
Correct.
Because these cameras actually transmit real-time occurrences.
Correct.
And you said that you first kind of took notice based on your estimate at 8:17. So I'm going to just skip forward here a little. This is 8:17 and 38 seconds. Back it up here a little. So this is 8:17 and about 30 seconds, and this is when you first sort of took notice of these cameras on the squad car, right?
Correct.
Or at the call center. Now, in terms of the pacing of this, is this more consistent with real time?
Yes.
And one of the things you ultimately told Agent Peterson was how you noticed how the squad car was rocking back and forth during the struggle.
Correct.
And if you could just watch this and tell me when you start to see that happen.
Well, it's currently shaking. And now currently shaking.
And by rocking back and forth, the car is actually going forward, a little backwards, and it's happening over and over and over again, right?
Correct.
And it's happening pretty much consistently during the course of the interaction of the officers, right?
Correct.
And that back door is opening and closing on the officers, right?
Correct.
Now, the other things that you notice when you look at this intersection, this is a pretty busy intersection, right?
Correct.
Lots of cars coming by, lots of people wandering about. This was May 25th, pretty nice spring day in the middle of, or not long after being cooped up inside here.
Correct.
So now, ultimately, you observed and you saw these officers using force, right? Or what you believe to be force.
With taking him out of the squad?
Right. Or putting them in the squad.
Yes.
And there was, what you observed was a struggle between officers and the person they were arresting, right?
Correct.
And that the struggle ultimately resulted in that squad shaking back and forth.
Correct.
And when you ultimately called Sergeant Pluger, you said, I don't know if this is a use of force or not, right?
Correct.
And Sergeant Pluger told you that it could be just a takedown.
Correct.
And a takedown wouldn't require a supervisor.
Correct.
Ultimately, you know that Sergeant Pluger responded to the scene, right? And is that a yes?
Yes, sorry.
It's okay. And that's confirmed in the computer-aided dispatch or the incident detail report, right?
Correct.
Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
Frank, any redirect?
Mr. Gray, just a few follow-up questions. I'm going to put 151 back up on the screen for you because I think in the questioning, I think counsel had asked you about MetLink, I think was the term he used. I just want to clarify that 2 points. So if we could put. And I want to just clarify those times as well. So if we go down to the time of 20:31:12, and if we could just expand that out so we could all see it a little better, please. I think counsel had asked you about this 20:31:12, and that being the Metcom call. Having looked at this, what time was your Metcom call?
So the information I added was at 2033 for the Metcom. That is our resource that we use radio to radio in the metro, so we can be quick and be able to get information back and forth.
So that 2033:02, what is the purpose of that entry right there? What are you reflecting?
I'm asking basically what is the reason why fire was added. I got on there and asked, what do you need fire for? Because there were no additional comments of saying why they were needed code 3.
And so what you've typed in there via Metcom is, and you sent out, yes?
Yes.
Is to tell what?
The information that I got via Metcom was that EMS would like the fire department for patient condition at the requested location of Park and 36th.
So that's the answer you got, is that that EMS wanted them to go there.
Correct.
Right. And so that was information you received before 2033:02, but you sent out at that time.
Correct.
Okay.
There's the time of me typing and putting it in there.
When you have referred to your work duties that day, you can take it down, thank you, as Channel 1, how does that signify you from other dispatchers?
We have 2 other channels. There's Channel 2, which is in charge of the north side, and then there's Channel 3, who has downtown in the 5th precinct, and then we have a relief dispatcher who's there to help us when we take our breaks or when we need to get up for any given reason.
So when you dispatch over Channel 1, does that go citywide or just precinct-wide?
Just on those 2 precincts, I have my own dedicated channel.
Having been questioned by opposing counsel about your call, as you sit here today, have you changed your mind about the reasons why you called Sergeant Pleeger when you did?
No.
You were asked about the number of screens that you have up, looking at all this, and still being able to see what was going on in this call from the city camera. That's been your work setup for about 7 years, correct?
Correct.
Something you do on a daily basis is keep track of all these moving parts.
Yes.
And that video that's up there, when it's not sending out work messages, can put up these city cameras, correct?
Correct.
But you don't control that.
Correct.
Do you know who or what office controls that?
It can change. Sometimes the supervisors at our center can pull up cameras. Like I said, sometimes we put them on there just to see what the weather is. Especially if we have inclement weather, if there's storms coming through, we can see actually how severe they are when people are calling in. Sometimes they put them up for incidences if we can see anything. And those cameras can be taken away from us. to the fact that the base, which is the precinct desk, has control over them and can move them to wherever they need to when they need to.
So what you're saying is that those cameras, where they're pointed and when they're available to you, can be controlled by members of the police department.
Correct.
And in your 6 years by this date and 7 years now, it's a rare incident for somebody to put an incident up on the screen like that.
Correct.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Ms. Curry. You may step down.
Thank you, sir.
Statement call its next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, the state calls Alicia Euler.
Stand right behind your chair to start. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth? Yeah. All right, have a seat. And just to make sure that we can hear you, we're going to have you take your mask off. I'm going to leave mine on, but and before you begin, and so we can test out the microphone, could you give us your full name, spelling each of your names?
Like my whole name?
Yep.
Alicia Marie Euler, ALISHA, MARIEEOYLER.
And I think I'm going to have you pull up just a little closer to the microphone. Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Slisher.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. And Ms. Euler, the key I'm going to give you is that when you speak, you should be able to hear your own voice over the speakers, all right? So just lean close enough to the microphone to be able to do that, all right? So first, I'm going to ask you a few questions so we can get to know you a little better. How old are you?
23.
23. And are you originally from Minnesota?
No.
Where did you grow up?
No, I'm from Arizona.
You can kind of pull back. You're actually speaking.
I'm sorry. I don't like this. Okay.
Yeah, I just need you to speak towards me.
Okay, are we good? All right.
Thank you. And you can even pretend you're yelling at me if you want to, or make your voice hit the back of the room, all right?
Okay.
So you said that you grew up in Arizona, is that right?
Yep.
What part of Arizona?
Just Arizona.
The whole state?
Yep.
Okay. When did you make your way over to Minnesota?
I don't know. A while ago.
Were you still in high school?
Yeah.
Did you attend any schools when you moved to Minnesota?
Yeah.
Where did you go to school?
Red Wing.
In Red Wing, Minnesota. Where else did you go?
St. Paul.
St. Paul. Okay. What's the last grade you completed through high school?
11th.
Okay. Can you tell the jury the different cities or towns that you've lived in since coming to Minnesota?
I guess Minneapolis.
Okay. Minneapolis, and I assume Red Wing for
Yeah.
one,
St. Paul.
and St. Paul. Okay. Are you currently employed?
No.
Can you tell the jury a little bit about the types of jobs that you've held?
I used to work at Speedway.
And which speedway do you recall the location?
38th in Chicago.
Right. What did you do at Speedway at 38th in Chicago?
I'm a shift lead.
Shift lead? What does that mean?
Like not like a regular employee, but not a manager, like kind of in the middle.
Okay. So not a lot of us have had the experience of working as a shift lead at Speedway, so I'd like you to just tell the jury a little bit of what's your day-to-day job like when you have that job.
I work at a cash register. I do paperwork. If a customer has an issue, I handle the issues.
Okay. You also work as a cashier.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have to train other people or supervise other cashiers?
Sometimes.
How long did you have that job, Miss Layler?
About a year.
Did you start as a shift lead, or did you have a
Yeah.
different position? You started as a shift lead? Can you tell the jury a little bit about the types of hours you would work there? Was it a full-time job?
Yep, I work 40 hours a week.
Okay.
Well, I did.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay. When did you typically start your shift?
Between 2 or 3 to closing 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock was closing?
Yeah.
Was it a pretty busy store?
It has its moments.
Okay. Well, I'd like to see if you recognize the area. First, I'd like to show just the witness what's been marked for identification as Exhibit 1. Oh.
All right, Mr. Swisher.
Thank you. Ms. Euler, we're ready for you now. I'm going to show you, first I'm going to offer Exhibit 1. And then I'm going to show you Exhibit 1. If you can take a look at the screen, just the one in front of you.
Oh.
All right. Do you recognize what's shown in Exhibit 1?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you see the speedway where you used to work?
Yeah.
I'm going to speak up a little bit.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. So, do you have something that looks like this in front of you? A little stylus? All right. What I'd like you to do is just take this and see if you can draw a circle around the speedway where you used to work. Thank you. All right. And the name of the store directly across the street, were you familiar with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
What's the name of that store?
Cut Foods.
You ever go in that store? Were you a customer there?
Not really.
Not really? Just a place across the street where you worked?
Yeah.
Okay. And then do you see what's directly across the street if you cross 38th Street from Cut Foods?
Yeah.
Do you recognize that building?
Yeah, I didn't know that's what it was, though.
What did you know it as?
I never really paid attention to it.
Okay. Well, do you recall whether or not you were working on May 25, 2020, Memorial Day?
Yeah.
And where were you working?
At Speedway.
At Speedway. All right. And do you recall when you began your shift?
About 3 o'clock.
And do you recall specifically what you were doing at the Speedway that day?
Ringing up customers.
And at the cash register?
Yeah.
Can you just, again, using your stylus, point or maybe put a little X around the area in front of the store where the cash register would be?
right here.
Okay. Are you able to see the outside across the street from the cash register?
Yes.
Yes? And you said you began working at 3. I'd like to draw your attention to a little after 8 o'clock in the evening that day. Do you recall something that caught your attention outside of the Speedway?
Yeah.
You tell the jury what caught your attention.
The police, like in that area, it's always police.
When did you first notice, or where did you first notice the police?
I would say like on the corner, right, like diagonal, like across the street, like right here. Oops.
Okay. And so for the record, that's across from Cup Foods, across 38th Street in what is labeled on Exhibit 1 as Dragon Walk. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. Please tell the jury in your own words what it is you saw that caught your attention.
Just the police, try not to cuss, just them messing with someone.
Okay. And when you say messing with someone, and thank you for not cussing, but when you say messing with someone, could you please describe what you mean by that?
Like, I don't really know how to explain it, just like disturbing somebody before I found out who it was.
Okay. Now, did you eventually find out who the person the police were disturbing in your words?
Yep.
Who was that?
George Floyd.
Had you ever met this person before?
No.
To your knowledge, he'd never been a customer in the Speedway?
No.
Okay. Can you please describe for the jury what you saw after you first noticed the police having this interaction with the person you now know to be Mr. Floyd?
Can you say that again?
So can you just describe, after you first noticed the police having this interaction with Mr. Floyd, what did you see happen?
Him in handcuffs.
You saw. Where was Mr. Floyd when you saw him in handcuffs?
Over here across the street.
Okay, in the area where you first indicated by the Dragon Walk?
I believe so, yeah.
And then what did you see happen after Mr. Floyd was in handcuffs?
I don't remember.
What's the next thing you do remember?
God.
Are you a little nervous today?
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. You just take your time, and we have plenty of time to get through this, okay? And so, just backing up, you'd indicated that Mr. Floyd was in handcuffs, and just think to yourself what you next remember seeing after you noticed he was in handcuffs.
I think they ended up putting him in the police car thing.
And which police car? Where was the police car that you saw?
The one right across from Cup Foods.
Okay. Now, before you saw that, did you see the police take Mr. Floyd across the street?
Yeah.
Yes? All right. So after you saw him in handcuffs, you saw him being taken across the street and then placed in the car right outside of Cup Foods. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And you owned a cell phone, correct?
Yeah.
You owned a cell phone at the time. Yes?
Yes.
And did you do anything with your cell phone as you began to notice this incident involving Mr. Floyd and the police?
Well, as you guys seen that on the security thing that I had my phone.
Right, you had your phone. Did you do anything with your phone?
Like recording it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'd like you to do first, before we get to the point where you start recording, just explain to the jury what you saw after you noticed the police officers putting Mr. Floyd in the car.
I don't remember.
Okay.
I can't think right now.
Well, you indicated that you began recording with your cell phone. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And during the time that you've been speaking to the police about this, you've provided your cell phone recordings to law enforcement. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
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 All right. And there were a total of 7 cell phone recordings that you personally took. Is that correct?
Yes.
You've reviewed each of those cell phone recordings, correct?
Yeah.
And those cell phone recordings, do they fairly and accurately depict what you saw on the street that day?
Yeah.
And 2 of those cell phone recordings were actually made from inside the store, correct?
Yes.
And then the rest were outside of the store.
Yeah.
Now, those cell phone recordings, the individual clips, have been marked and disclosed to counsel as exhibits 2 through 8. You wouldn't know that, but they have. And at this time, I'm going to offer exhibits 2 through 8. Yeah.
Any objection?
No, you're.
2 through 8 are received.
And then, Ms. Euler, you also had an opportunity to review a surveillance video. Is that right?
Yes.
And the surveillance video, for the record, is Exhibit 11. Having reviewed that video, did that video, fairly and accurately capture things that you observed when you were working at Speedway on the 25th?
Yes.
Okay. And then you were able to review that surveillance video in a format in which all of your cell phone videos, or I guess I should say 6 of the 7 cell phone videos, had been spliced into or put next to the surveillance video, correct?
Yes.
And that kind of gives a perspective of when those individual videos were shot. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then the combination of the 6 videos that we've just received and Exhibit 11, which has been offered and received, would that composition better help you and assist you in explaining your testimony to the jury?
Yes.
All right. And that, for the record, is Exhibit 9. I offer Exhibit 9.
Any objection?
No, you're.
9 is received.
And at this time, I'm going to go ahead and publish Exhibit 9. I ask you to take Exhibit 1 down. And when I say publish, I mean I'm going to play it, and at times I'm going to stop and pause and have you explain some things. All right?
Okay. Okay.
All right. If we could begin publishing Exhibit 9, please. And I believe we're paused at 7 seconds. At this point, you can see, and I'm going to place a circle around the officers. You see them there?
Yes.
And are those the people that you saw interacting with the person you now know to be Mr. Floyd?
Yep.
And your first interaction that you noticed was actually across the street by the Dragon Walk. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, as Mr. Floyd's being taken over the car, I think that we will soon hear your first recording. So if we can resume play.
Always some shit going on over here.
After you made that short recording, and that was you, I suppose, narrating.
Yes.
Okay. After you were narrating that portion, you continued to watch.
Yes.
Now, at this time, Ms. Euler, did you notice any bystanders, anybody in the street
No.
We're going to be approaching 8:16 and 30 seconds. Ms. Euler, were you continuing to watch the events as you were working the cash register at Speedway at this time?
I believe so, yes.
All right, now we've paused at about 8:17, and at some point, did you notice some other police officers arrive on the scene?
I think so.
Let's resume play here. Okay, and let's pause. Now, at this time, I'm showing you two other individuals who are joining the first two officers that you saw. You noticed those?
Yeah.
And what did you see those two officers do after they arrived?
I don't remember.
Let's continue. From your vantage point inside the Speedway, were you able to hear anything outside?
No.
All right, let's pause here for a moment, and we're at 8:18 and 10 seconds. Now, as best you can, describe for the jury what you recall seeing the officers do with Mr. Floyd prior to getting to this point.
Before this point?
Before this point, for example, did you see Mr. Floyd get into a vehicle?
Like off of what we just watched?
What do you recall seeing with Mr. Floyd and the squad car just before we get to this point?
Like when they drag him out?
Okay. All right. Let's resume. Now we're paused at about almost 8:19. I asked you previously about bystanders and noticing bystanders. At some point, as you made these observations, did you see a crowd of bystanders gather?
Not till like after.
After what?
Like after they did yeah.
Okay. So at this point, you're not seeing a crowd either in the immediate area or across the street at the Speedway?
I'm trying to remember. I don't remember.
Okay. Well, let's resume play. No, you can keep going. I'm going to pause here. And this is at 8:20 and 20 seconds. And I ask you some questions about some people, again, some bystanders in the area. Do you know who this person in the lower left corner wearing sandals and shorts and a black shirt is?
No.
Don't recognize him, never seen him before?
No.
Do you know the person in the dark shirt, hooded sweatshirt, and the blue pants?
No.
Never met her before either?
No.
Okay. Or how about the child behind her in the green shirt?
No.
Not familiar with her either?
No.
Okay. If you please resume. I'm going to pause for a moment here. Do you recognize that person, that officer? Do you recall seeing an officer interacting with a group of bystanders who would later gather?
I think so.
Can you physically describe that person as best you can remember?
I don't really know. It's been so long.
Do you recall previously talking about a bald police officer?
I think in one of my videos I was talking to a person.
Okay. A bald officer. Do
Yeah.
you recall as you sit here today what the bald officer did?
I think he was like yelling at people. like before or after this.
Do you also recall describing a tall officer?
Yeah.
What did the tall officer do?
I think he was like, I don't remember. There's so much.
Let's resume play.
There's always some shit going on.
Pause for a moment. Now, what we heard there that was imposed at the same time as the surveillance video was your second recording. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes.
And again, that was your voice when you said there are always some...
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Had you continued to watch these events out the window that entire time?
Did I watch it outside?
From inside?
I think I went outside to smoke a cigarette.
All right, I'm going to ask the play to resume and ask you to pay particular attention to your video on the right side, okay? Freeze. Yeah, go a little bit further. Stop. All right. Now, showing you what appears to be a reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Recognize that?
Yeah,
Who's that?
that's me.
Okay. So that's you recording the events reflected in the window, correct?
Yep.
So based on that, would you agree that you were inside the speedway at the time this particular recording was made?
Yes.
Resume, please. Pause. Now, can you please explain to the jury why did you continue to record what you were seeing here?
Because I always see the police, they're always messing with people, and it's wrong and it's not right.
I'm going to then direct your attention to the right side of the screen as well. You see that you briefly turned your camera away from the officers in the squad car towards the area that's right by the Dragon Walk. Is that right? And can you tell the jury what you see here?
I see people standing there, but that's not why I shifted the camera.
Can you explain why you shifted the camera?
Because that's where it started from.
Okay, so when you say that's where it started from, I think your description initially was that there were some officers who were, to use your words, messing with Mr. Floyd.
Yep.
Okay, and this is the area in which they were messing with Mr. Floyd?
Yep, when it started.
I'd like to resume play again, please. Let's pause for a moment, and you can see that that would have been your second recording has stopped. And at this point, we're continuing to watch the surveillance video. Please resume. We could freeze here. Let it go just a little further. Stop. All right. So again, I've already asked you about some of the people in the crowd, and you said you didn't know them. I want to add some of folks. There's a person in a white T-shirt. Do you recognize that person?
I don't know that person.
You've never seen that young woman before?
Not before like this.
Right. And then I think walking by, I don't know if you noticed, there was a couple with a child. Had you ever seen them before?
No.
And then there's a gentleman here in a dark hooded sweatshirt. Had you ever seen that person before?
No.
Please resume. Now, at some point, you indicated that you'd gone outside of the store to smoke a cigarette. Is that right?
Yep.
You continue to watch these events unfold as you were outside of the store?
Yep.
As you were watching from outside the store, did you see any of the bystanders interact with police officers?
I think they were like yelling at each other. I don't really know what they said. I was kind of too far away.
Couldn't make out any specific words?
No.
Do you recall seeing a woman with a black shirt and a white headband?
No. This was like a year ago. A long time ago.
Go ahead and resume. All right. If you could pause. All right. I'd asked you about seeing a woman with a black shirt and a white headband. I'm wondering if now looking, if this refreshes your memory at all about this person.
No.
All right. From outside, then, at your vantage point, outside of the Speedway, you began what is now your fourth recording, and I think for the record, that starts at about was it 8:25:26? Please resume.
What happened? I don't know. I know that the tall dude that's leaning on his feet, they had him in the other side of the car, and then he pulled him out on the ground.
You could pause for a moment. Right. Whose voice was that?
That was mine.
Okay. And were you describing to someone who was standing next to you what you just witnessed earlier?
Yeah.
Okay. If you could resume, please. Pause. It seems that you've spent a lot of time watching this encounter.
Yeah.
And you were continuing to occasionally record.
Yeah.
Okay. If you could resume, please. If you could pause. Did you hear that ambulance in the background?
Mm-hmm.
At some point, do you recall an ambulance actually arriving?
I believe so, yeah.
As best you can remember, can you describe what you saw after the ambulance got there?
I think the person was going on a stretcher.
If we could resume, please. If you'd stop. And at this point, you can see that the ambulance has arrived, and there's a ambulance worker coming out of the passenger side of the vehicle. Is that right?
Yeah.
In the time that you've been watching up to this point, did you see this individual ever get up from the first position he was in when he first went down?
I don't remember.
Please resume. Stop. All right. So you see that the street camera has now changed positions. Is that right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
do you recognize that person?
That's me.
That's you. Okay. So that's you, and you're holding your cell phone.
Yep.
And that's you recording, so we can give the jury a good idea of where you were at the time you were taking that footage. Right? And that's when the ambulance arrived. You continued to observe. Please resume. Do you ever personally observe the officers get up off of George Floyd?
I don't think so. I don't know.
If you could pause, back up about 2 seconds.
I think I was more so like I was recording it, but I was also like trying not to get hit by the cars coming in the gas station.
All right, understood. All right, if you could resume then, please. If you can pause, you can see the stretcher is fully out here. Is that right?
Yeah.
And then I want to draw your attention again to the last officer closest to the head of the individual on the ground. Did you see him change position at this point?
No.
Okay, please resume. And then you made your final recording as Mr. Floyd was taken from the ground, loaded onto the stretcher, and placed in the back of the ambulance. if you could pause, please. And then you see that at approximately 8:29 and 29 seconds p.m., Mr. Floyd is fully placed into the back of the ambulance. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Please resume. And at that point, if you would pause, please, at 8:29 and about 52 seconds, I believe, 52, 53 seconds, you stopped recording. Is that right?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. And you can take that down now. What did you see after the ambulance pulled away?
There was just a bunch of people yelling and fighting, and I didn't really understand why, but now obviously we know why.
What did you do after you stopped? After you stopped watching outside?
I went back to work.
And that would have been around about 8:30.
I don't remember.
Do you remember when your shift ended?
10 o'clock.
And so you worked up until 10 o'clock.
Yep.
Do you recall what you saw after you left work that day?
Tape. There was a bunch of tape everywhere, and they made me instead of going down Chicago to go home, they made me go around and down the street, all the way down, I think 35th.
Was the scene had crime scene tape around it?
Yeah.
And you weren't able to access it. Did you make another recording of that crime scene tape?
I think I did.
At this time, I believe we've already received Exhibit 7, and I'd like to publish Exhibit 7, please. Yeah, that'd be good. Well, you know what? I'm almost finished here.
Go ahead.
Yeah. If we could just publish Exhibit 7. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's Exhibit 8. All right. If you could pause, please. And Ms. Euler, you described the scene being taped up with crime scene tape and you weren't able to access it.
Mm-hmm.
Does this show the area where the crime scene tape was?
Yes.
All right. If you could resume play, please. And stop. All right, and you can take that down. What did you do then after you made that recording?
I went home.
And at some point, you were contacted by police officers, is that right?
Yep.
They talked to you about what happened, took a statement from you,
Yep.
and you voluntarily provided the videos to them, is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Council's going to have some questions for you, but I think we're going to take a break first.
Let's take our 20-minute break. Let's reconvene at 3:25. All right, just a reminder, you're still under oath. Mr. Nelson.
Good afternoon, ma'am. I don't know if that's you or me here. So I'd like to ask you a few follow-up questions, if that's okay.
Okay.
If the court would, I'm going to show you Exhibit 1, as we had before. And I think that you indicated that you were about right there, right? When
Yeah.
you first observed everything?
Yeah.
All right. Now, can you just describe for me generally, like, the inside of the speedway? Like, would you have been facing customers, looking out the window to your right? Would you have been standing forward and looking out the window?
It would be like to my side.
Okay. So if you were in the subway area, or excuse me, the speedway area right here, in this area that you're talking about, like, your back would have been facing that way?
No. Yes.
Yeah. And so when you observed what happened over in this area, you would have been looking back over your right shoulder.
Yes.
Okay. And that's when you first observed, that's when you first observed the police interacting with Mr. Floyd, right?
Yes.
And you observed him get handcuffed or he was in handcuffs at that point, right?
Yes.
And you observed them walk him back across the street towards the area here where the squad car was.
Yes.
Correct? Now, again, you said that you were working, you were taking care of customers, things of that nature, right?
Yep.
And obviously we know that you didn't film the entirety of the incident from the beginning to the end, right?
Right.
And that's because you were working, right?
Yeah.
In part, at least. And I think as we saw from your video, there were cars coming in to get gas, there were people coming into the store, that type of thing was happening, right?
Yep.
All right. And you ultimately, you remember that you gave a statement to an agent with the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension.
Yep.
His name was Brent Peterson. Would you disagree if I told you that that was on May 28th of 2020?
Okay. I don't remember the.
Sure.
Yeah.
We have no reason to. It was within a couple of days of this incident, right?
Yep.
And do you recall telling Agent Peterson one of the things that you didn't understand was why they took him back out of the car?
Yep.
Because based on what you observed Mr. Floyd get into the car, both doors were shut, correct?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, according to your video, the taller officer just pulled him out of the back of the squad car.
Yep.
All right. Now, you also, do you recall testifying or telling Agent Peterson that the people in this area here, there was a female cop?
I don't remember.
All right. Yeah, sorry. Do you remember a female police officer being there?
I don't remember. This was so long ago.
Okay. Would it refresh your recollection to review, well, did you ever have an opportunity to review a transcript or an audio recording of your interview with Agent Peterson?
Say that again?
Prior to coming in and testifying, were you ever given a copy of your transcript?
I seen it or heard it.
Did you read it?
No.
Okay. Would it help refresh your recollection to look at a copy of your transcript?
Not really.
Okay. So you don't remember ever telling Agent Peterson that there was a female officer on scene?
It could have been, yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot of officers.
All right. Now, you testified that you took the first two videos from inside the speedway.
Yeah.
And then at some point you went out into kind of in the middle of the parking lot area, right?
Yep.
Or the entrance where cars would be coming in to get to the gas pumps.
Yep.
You were out there on your break, right?
Yep.
And I think we saw, based on your video, that what you did is you sort of zoomed in so you could get a closer camera view, right?
Yep.
And you zoomed it to the maximum that your camera would allow you to zoom in.
Yep.
And from where you were standing, ultimately when you were outside, you had the opportunity to make observations about what the officers were doing with Mr. Floyd, right?
Okay.
I mean, would you agree with that?
Yep.
And you had the opportunity to make observations about kind of what else was going on, right?
Yeah.
In fact, in one of the videos, you actually had a conversation with someone else, right?
Yep.
So if you were standing across the street from where Mr. Floyd and the police officers were interacting, you would have one view, but you would agree that when we look at a camera, that's just kind of one perspective, right?
I mean, I guess, but there's multiple cameras though.
I understand. I guess what I'm saying is that when you're recording, your camera is only going to capture what's out in front, right?
Yep.
But when you're recording, you said you were, looking, making sure you didn't get hit by a car, right? So you have the ability to turn your head from left to right. You can look up, you can look down, you can talk to people, and you can look around, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But your camera's still in that one fixed position.
Yep.
All right. So you were able to make observations. As this incident progressed, would you agree that more and more people started stopping and watching what was going on?
Yes.
There were some people standing in front of you. There were some people standing to your right. Recall that?
Yep.
And then obviously there were the people that were closer over by where the officers were as well, right?
Yeah.
And then even on the kitty corner from where you were, right? There were people standing there watching.
Yeah.
And if you went to your right on the other side, there were people standing there watching, right?
I think so.
Right. And cars were driving by and buses were driving by, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes cars, we see in your video, they would stop for quite some period of time and then drive off, right?
Yeah.
And would you also agree that as this incident progressed, the crowd of people started becoming more and more vocal?
Like, what do you mean? Like,
Well, they started yelling more.
I think so.
Right. So, like that first video when you step outside and there's fewer people, there's not as many people yelling, right?
Yeah.
But by the end, when the ambulance takes Mr. Floyd away, there's a fairly large crowd out there, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of people yelling.
Okay.
I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah.
And those people, some of those people, you could tell were upset, right?
Yeah.
I think you said that a lot of people were yelling and fighting, right?
Yeah.
So you can get a sense that people were angry.
Okay.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
And that feeling of anger is different when you're there and watching it than when it is when you're here talking about it in the courtroom.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I think if you're still upset about the situation, you're still going to be upset about it.
Understood. But in that moment, you would agree when there's people yelling and there's people driving by and there's people honking, right? That's a different feeling than you may still be upset here today in court, but it's a much different feeling now than it is then.
Okay.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
All right. And ultimately, again, you took these various cell phone videos, you provided them to law enforcement voluntarily, right?
Yep.
And then you went back inside, you finished your shift, and then when you left, the scene was taped off because it was a crime scene, right?
Yep.
I have no further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So when you saw the officers bring Mr. Floyd across the street, did you see Mr. Floyd struggle with or resist the officers?
No.
And when the officers first brought Mr. Floyd to the ground and you saw the 3 officers on top of him, there wasn't a large crowd at that time, was there?
I don't think so, no.
In fact, that didn't happen until much later, correct?
Yep.
And you never saw the officers get up off of Mr. Floyd until after the ambulance arrived, after the stretcher was pulled out. Is that right?
Yep, that's what it said in the video. Well, shows in the video.
All right, nothing further.
All right, thank you. You may step down. Mr. Frank.
Your Honor, the state would call Donald Williams to the stand.
You can stand behind the chair for a second. Yes, sir. Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm on the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do, sir.
Have a seat.
Yes, Your Honor.
And just to test out the microphone, if you could give us your full name, spelling each of your names.
Full name is Donald Wynn Williams II. DONALD WYNN. Last name WILLIAMS II.
Thank you. Mr. Frank.
Mr. Williams,
Good afternoon.
can you tell the jurors roughly how old are you?
33.
Okay. And what do you do for a living?
I'm an entrepreneur and a professional fighter. And a father.
And a what?
And a father.
And that takes up probably as much time as all the others.
Yes, it does.
So you, by entrepreneur, you have some of your own companies that you run,
That is correct, Your Honor.
doing various businesses.
Correct.
And tell the jury, if you would, sort of where you live, not your address, but the city or town where you live.
I'm in a unique situation, but I do have a place in Roseville in South Minneapolis.
And your place in South Minneapolis, well, are you familiar with Cup Foods?
That is correct.
And how far is your place from Cup Foods, roughly?
Not too far from Cubs.
Good enough. Good enough.
So, literally, yeah, like on the next block,
Yep.
Not too far down.
So how long have you lived in the Twin Cities area, the Minneapolis area?
Minneapolis, Twin Cities, area for 33 years, pretty much my whole life. I'm a city kid.
Okay. And Mr. Williams, well, before I forget to ask you, you've done some work in the security field.
That is correct. Been working in security for over 10 years.
And what does that mean? What do you do to work in security?
Far security, private security. I worked at the clubs, at Pichaluches, different clubs downtown Minneapolis. Worked at Allied Security for a year before this situation as well. And I've done private security for the Mystic Lake kids as well. So I've been working security for quite a few years.
And so that means everything from, I suppose, being what we might think of as a bouncer to just
Yeah,
keeping...
so from being a bouncer to a private security, like I said, being a door guy, to escorting some of the high-profile athletes as well too. Some of the comedians that came into Minnesota, and like I said, some of the high-profile kids from Mystic Lake that families own Mystic Lake. I have done multiple private securities for them as well on different events throughout Minnesota.
So for doing that job, do you have to learn some use of force
Correct. Well, my uniqueness is I'm a wrestler from high school that developed into a martial artist. So that's what gave me more of the opportunity to be able to do the private security and things like that, and just started connections from the mixed martial arts world, from my previous manager to just different friends inside of my circle.
And when you're doing security, do you sometimes have the opportunity to work with Minneapolis police officers?
That is correct. I have worked side by side with Minneapolis Police Departments and Minneapolis Police since I was 21 years old. And again, I'm 33 years old right now. I work downtown. Like Pete Luce brought me in a couple of years ago when one of the top guys, Antonio, left to go to Vegas and work out in Vegas. Pete Luce reached out to me and put me at the door, and I was able to control my city because I have a relationship with both sides of the city. It don't matter if it's business, streets, friends, different areas. My connection is pretty broad to the Twin Cities. So I'm able to talk certain people out of certain situations downtown from there. So, yeah, that's fine. Yep.
Okay, so working security, you sometimes work with Minneapolis police officers who are also working security.
That is correct, off duty.
And sometimes when they're called in as police officers to an incident.
That is correct.
And since you mentioned the mixed martial arts, let's talk about that a little bit. You mentioned also wrestling.
That is correct.
And when did you start in the sport of wrestling?
I started in 7th grade, Your Honor. Or, sir, 7th grade.
Yeah, I haven't earned that yet.
Yeah, right. Hey, soon.
Somebody might be upset if you start calling me. But so you started wrestling at a very young age.
Correct.
And wrestling as a sport, what kind of things do you got to learn if you want to be a good wrestler?
That is correct.
What kind of things do you need to learn?
You need to learn the mentality of being a wrestler. It's a hard pace, different grind. It's not really a sport; it's a lifestyle. You got to really learn the technique of wrestling. And then it's different. You got to learn the different atmospheres of wrestling as well. You could be the top guy wrestling in an arena where everyone hates you, and you're wrestling against someone that everybody wants you to win. So you got to be able to absorb all that and be able to move forward and perform. So those three things.
And how about the physical aspects of it? What kind of things do you need to do to be a good wrestler physically to beat your opponent?
Yeah, you have to be able to condition your body. You have to be able to do different circuits, different workouts, running. Just conditioning your body to be able to be an elite wrestler.
Is there a lot of using your weight to control the other person?
That is right, correct. When you first start wrestling, you don't really understand the weight shifting. You're kind of like falling all over the place. But then eventually you learn how to control your weight off of someone else's movement and body movement and things like that. So you know the different pressures and different just movement. And it's called flow wrestling. You eventually learn how to flow wrestle when it comes to that, and it's just like not being so resistant to everything.
And so you're saying flow, F-L-O-W, not
Yeah, like flow, F-L-O. Yeah, flow,
Yeah.
W.
Wasn't sure if you said float or flow. So
Flow,
Got it.
F-L-O-W.
So would you tell the jurors then about your wrestling career?
I wrestled Minneapolis Edison in high school. Again, I started in 7th grade, so I had to fast track and catch up to all the kids that was already better than me because most kids started at 4 years old. So coming into Edison, they were a really good program at the time, probably the best one since 2006. I was able to transfer in, crack the lineup at Edison, and I was a multiple-time state entrance, a couple times sections champs, and I went on and wrestled in college as well at DCTC. I wrestled there for 1 year, and then went over and wrestled at RCTC, which is another junior college. And from there, I've just been growing into wrestling, learning different wrestling. I coach youth programs since I got out of high school, and I currently coach my kids right now. They currently wrestle in different friends' kids as well, and help them develop their skills and to do different private lessons and things like that with them. So this all started from me being a 7th grader, playing in the backyard with some friends, and they.
It's really going to stop right there.
That's fine. He asked me to explain.
Yeah, but we're going to shorten it up a little bit because
Correct.
that's when you can ask him more questions.
Yes, sir.
It also helps the court reporter who is taking everything down on a stenographic machine.
Correct.
That way she can get a break between. So,
Yes, Your Honor.
thank you.
So I'm going to back you up a little bit.
Yes, sir.
Just to ask you a couple specific questions. You mentioned DCTC.
Correct.
Can you describe for us what that is? What
Yeah,
that,
Dakota County Technical College.
okay, so it's like a junior college
Yes,
wrestling.
junior college, correct.
And the other was RCTC?
Yep, Rochester Community College.
And so you wrestled at the college level.
Correct.
Then at some point, did you take up mixed martial arts?
Yes, about sophomore year at Rochester. I'm in a unique situation. I have my kid with me, so we kind of shifted towards getting our grades together and trying to create a plan to be able to wrestle in college eligibility-wise. I end up finding martial arts from different friends like Marcus Levesters, Jack Jusila, Jafari Veneer, and Carey, and things like that were my coaches that wrestled. And they wrestled and coached me, and they ended up jumping into martial arts. And I came back to visit and kind of fell into the martial arts world with them.
So let me just
bro,
cut you off.
So
you've done a lot in mixed martial arts. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to try and walk you through it a little bit.
Yep.
But what year was it that you started seriously training in mixed martial arts?
About let's see, 22, like 09-ish, like 09.
Have you been involved in it ever since?
I've been involved in it ever since, correct.
Continue to be involved in it?
Yeah, continue to be involved in it. As of the last 9 months, I have not been training.
Okay. And ever done the mixed martial arts, what we call it, a fight, professionally?
Correct. Amateur. I got 10 amateur fights and about close to 20 professional fights.
So about 2009 you start,
Correct.
through 2020, correct?
Correct.
How often during that time period are you in the gym training?
That's Monday through Friday. Like I devoted my life to mixed martial arts and my kids' life to mixed martial arts. So it's a 40 hours or more a week job at the Minnesota Martial Arts Academy. I was in there majority in the mornings from 10 a.m. to sometimes 3 in the afternoon training for hopefully a fight.
So the Mixed Martial Arts Academy, that's the business where you trained?
That is the gym I train at, correct.
And when you were training there, did you ever did you ever train with Minneapolis police officers who were there?
Correct.
Describe that for the jury, please.
Not everybody they don't always let you know that they're a cop or CIA agent or FBI agent, but we all kind of link together because they're trying to learn how to be able to defend different chokes or be able to detain different people. So Greg Nelson, which is the head professor there, he's a unique guy. He's been able to work close with the military and the Army and the combative team. So we get a lot of Army combative people coming in and training with us just so they can learn how to, defend themselves in war, I'm taking. And, so I've been training next to some of them for, like I said, a decade.
And some of them are Minneapolis police officers training there.
Yep, that is correct. And they're not all Minneapolis Police Department. They're from all different precincts, all different backgrounds of the law enforcement.
So when you're training in mixed martial arts, is part of the ultimate goal to get the other person to submit?
Yeah, that's the goal of it. Everybody gets into martial arts for different reasons. As you're rolling and understanding it, yes, your whole thing is to be able to get the person to submit when you do put a choke or a different submission on them.
So let me talk to you about that. So you're trained on what are called chokeholds.
Correct.
And what kind of training do you receive to do a chokehold?
You go into a basic class. They teach you the basic techniques of jiu-jitsu, how to be able to defend yourself on the back, how to be able to defend off of a choke, and how to be able to put someone in a choke as well. And those are some of the basics that we learned from them.
So if we talk about specifically chokeholds involving the neck,
Correct.
did you also have to learn about the structures in the neck that can lead to a chokehold?
Correct.
And
Different. There's air chokes and there's blood chokes and there's limb chokes.
so explain the first two.
Air choke is more of like choking someone. They still have air to breathe in there, and they're able to absorb it and feel it, and then you also have a choke where it's a blood choke where it's specifically attacks the side of the neck, and it specifically cuts off the circulation of your arteries and stops the different blood flowing from top of your head to the bottom of your head. And sometimes you could get in a blood choke and not know you're in a blood choke until you're unconscious.
In your training, have there been times when you've been rendered unconscious through a chokehold?
Correct. I have been submitted on a professional level in live matches, and I have over 30 jiu-jitsu submission matches where I have got caught in a submission before on a rear naked choke and a front choke. Only have been only choked out twice in the jiu-jitsu side, but on my martial arts, on the fighting side, I've been submitted maybe 3 times on a side choke.
So in that training, do they have to teach you what that's like so you know to avoid it?
Yes, correct. So it's a uniqueness. You have to kind of like be acceptable to being choked. You know, you can't just like not normal people can just really get choked. You got to relax. You got to be able to breathe. You got to be able to let the choke happen, and you got to be able to know when to actually tap out on the choke, because you're in practice. You're not trying to put this person to sleep, but you're trying to get them to understand how it feels to be choked. So we do go back and forth choking each other. Sometimes you'll see white stars when you get choked, and it kind of like helps you understand, you know, when you went too far, you know. And some people choke tolerance is higher than normal. You know, some are really low, where when you do put a blood choke, they're tapping right away, and some people will be able to absorb it and actually meditate there because they want to be able to be comfortable in the choke and be able to get out of it in live action.
So you use the term tap out, and what does that mean?
So tap out would be, for instance, so if I have you in a submission and I feel like it's getting to a certain point where it's not comfortable for me, I just tap my opponent, and my opponent releases his choke, and then we're back to grappling again. And, you know, I catch him in a submission. If he's not comfortable, he taps. And this goes for the neck, limbs, and all that, so you don't harm each other during practice.
What can happen, have you learned through your training and experience, if you don't tap out, if a choke goes too far?
If you don't tap out, you can lose consciousness, and you can develop different, I'm not a doctor, but somnies from your brain to your body because of lack of oxygen and things like that.
So we talked about that a lot, but I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Correct.
We'll come back to that in a little bit.
Yes, sir.
I want to take your attention back to May 25th of 2020. You remember that day?
Correct, I do.
And on that day, at some point, did you go to Cup Foods?
Correct.
And prior to going to Cup Foods that day, had you done any activities with, for instance, your son?
Correct. Yeah, so earlier that day, I just went fishing with some wrestling friends, wrestling family, me and my son, and we caught maybe 3 bass throughout that whole day of fishing. It was a beautiful day during the day, so everybody was out on the lake, so we went fishing and caught 3 bass. After we got done fishing, rolled around a little bit, had to fish in a little bowl on the side, you know, the boat swimming around the water, uncomfortableness. And once we got done fishing, we had to, you know, drain the water, take our fish, and find somewhere to actually transport our fish back home on a, you know, safe way, I guess, to their death. So we put them in a bag and tied them up, and we pretty much suffocated them on our way home for our ride.
So that you could enjoy them later.
Yeah, so we can actually cut them up, eat them, and freeze them, which are still in the freezer.
And so at some point then you decided to go to Cup Foods. Why did you decide to go there that day?
So I went to Cup Foods because I haven't cut a fish up in since I was about 23, working at a butcher at Solo grocery store. So me and the fish we were going through some things of watching this fish actually die and watching him lose his air and watching his eyes actually roll back in the back of his head. So after we got done cutting them up, me and my son was actually watching on a YouTube channel trying to figure out how to actually cut the fish the proper way and make sure that we're doing it right, cutting the fins off, chopping the side of the head off, you know, filleting the fish. So after I got done doing that, I just needed air for myself. So I went to the store to go get something to drink at the time, and I kind of just snuck out from the family once I got done cutting the fish.
So did you drive there?
That is correct, I did drive.
Okay, I'm going to show you something we've already received as Exhibit 1 on the screen. Can you show Exhibit 1, please? Do you recognize what's depicted in that photograph?
Correct.
All right. And this is the intersection of 38th and Chicago where Cup Foods is, correct?
Correct.
And you will notice on the bench in front of you one of these little styluses, hopefully.
Correct.
And you can draw on this, and I'd ask you just to show the jurors where you drove up and where you parked.
Is it showing up? Do I gotta? Is it showing up on there or no?
I don't see it yet.
I don't see it either. Oh, there it goes. Came from that angle. So, wow, I parked somewhere in here.
All right. So for the record, you drove down 38th Street towards Cup Foods and parked on 38th next to Cup Foods.
That is correct.
All right. Okay. And I'm going to show you some photographs to sort of help illustrate what you did that day. All right. And I'm going to first, Your Honor, offer Exhibit 18.
No objection.
18 is received.
Okay, can you put 18 up, please? Now, do you recognize this photograph?
Correct.
This is something we had shown to you before.
That is correct.
And who is that in the photograph?
That is Donald Wynn Williams II, which is me.
Okay. And is that you parked, the area where you parked on 38th?
That is correct.
And that's you walking up?
That is correct.
And can you describe for us what you're wearing, the sweatshirt that you're wearing?
Northside Boxing Club.
Okay. So that's not the academy where you train, that's just another club?
No, that is not. It's the youth gym for boxing.
And so when you decided to go to Cup Foods, did you get all dressed up and get ready for going out?
No, not at all.
Okay. This is just an outfit you threw on?
That is correct.
All right. When you were on your way to Cup Foods, did you grab your cell phone and take it with you?
That is correct.
You had it with you?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. And so after you got out of your car, as you walked up towards Cup Foods, did you notice any police cars in the area?
That is correct. I did.
Okay. And describe for the jurors and kind of what you saw as you're walking up.
As you can tell by my face expression, I was kind of like, oh, police is here. And I noticed that there was 2 police squad cars out there. And I just had a look on my face like, oh, we're in the city, something else is going on. Should I get back to my car or not?
Okay. And what did you decide to do?
My energy just kept pushing me forward, and I kept walking.
Okay. And so you kept walking towards the store?
That is correct. I started walking towards Cub Foods entrance.
And did you end up going into Cup Foods?
No, I did not make it into Cub Foods.
Why not? What stopped you?
My energy stopped me. The surroundings stopped me. The energy of the air, just me as a person, if people know me personally. It's just the energy was off. I couldn't get in the door for some reason. And then once I realized why.
So when you came around, so Cup Foods sits on the corner, correct?
That is correct.
So 18 shows you walking up on the 38th Street side.
Correct.
When you get around the corner, what is it that starts to affect your energy and your decision to go in the store or not?
Yeah, so I was just sitting at the door, just like, man, there's so much going over here. Do I involve myself? Because I'm usually, I pay attention to my city. So I was contemplating with myself, do I involve myself or do I go inside the store? I started hearing different voices from people that they know, telling someone that they just calm down, everything's going to be okay. And then I heard, some people saying that, I'm looking for some point for their mother. And I heard another voice just saying that, you should let him up and that he's not resisting arrest. And there's just certain things that just kept boop, 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 hitting me while I was standing there like, should I go in the door or not?
And did you go into the store then?
I did not go into the store.
All right. So now I'm going to show you, first I will offer Exhibit 19.
Any objection?
No.
19 was received.
Put 19 up, please. And do you recognize what's depicted in this photograph?
That is correct.
And is that you then walking along Chicago?
That is correct, walking on Chicago.
All right. So when you get into this area, what are you experiencing right here where you're walking along?
Again, like I said, I was just hearing different emotions, different comments, and at this point I just was kind of like observing. So I kind of like slowly trotted over there.
And we can see in Exhibit 19 there's a couple other people on the sidewalk here. Did you know any of those people as you walked up?
No, I did not know no one out there at all.
The first people that you see while you're there, you stayed at that area for quite a while, correct?
That is correct.
So the people that you first see as you're walking up, can you kind of describe how they looked or how they appeared to you, who they were?
Correct. Again, I don't know none of them. I just remember off of certain visualization that it was 3 people outside. It was an older guy, a younger lady, and maybe one more other gentleman out there. And yeah.
And then this photograph also shows in front of you a person with a green shirt. Do you remember seeing that person?
Not at all.
Okay.
Like she wasn't like she was there, but I didn't see her.
Okay. And so you, from where you are in this photograph, where did you go? What did you end up doing?
I believe I ended up probably standing next to this little spot right here where she's standing at the point. I probably was standing somewhere in here after I came from this way, and I just sat there and chilled right in this area for a second, observing like security officers do. I observed the scene first before I spoke.
And as you observed it, what are you seeing and hearing?
Well, once I get there, I hear an older guy saying, "It's going to be okay, quit this and arrest. They're going to get you up and put you in the car." And just hearing people, different people actually vocalizing their concerns to the officer, and hearing George on the ground pretty much pleading for his life, saying he's sorry, I can't breathe, I want my mom, just please let me up, and things like that.
So, while we still have Exhibit 19 up, can you show the jury after you got done observing, where did you go from there?
I ended up somewhere in this vicinity throughout the whole time.
Okay. And so when you went over by the curb area there, what did you see happening on the ground behind the squad car?
Well, before I walked up, I noticed it was an officer standing right here, kind of pretty much dictating the crowd from only standing on this curb right here where they're at. Noticed that part right away. And then I finally noticed it's going to be on the opposite side, but I noticed George's head was kind of sticking out from the side of the car. And then I noticed Officer Chavez right here with his knee circulated on George's neck. But this is all happening on this side of the car.
All right, we'll get to that in just a second while we're still on this photograph.
Correct.
When you went over there initially, did you leave the curb and go onto the street?
There is a possibility that I was battling with myself to stay on the curb and throughout the time. Correct.
Okay. We know later you went into the street area, but when you first got there, did you stay on the curb?
Yeah, when I first got there, I stayed right here. I didn't move too much right there. I stayed here, and I might have stepped down once or twice back and forth, but I can 100% remember.
And you saw an officer standing in the area you showed us before.
He was about like somewhere.
Did you learn later that officer's name?
Yeah, I read his badge. I read his badge. Can I say his name right now? No. But at the time, I think I called him by his name from his badge, just from visualization, reading his badge.
Was it Officer Tao?
Correct.
All right. And you were able to read that from his badge on his uniform?
That's how much respect I tried to give him at the beginning.
And so you saw him there.
Correct.
And what did you understand his role to be when you were observing?
He was a dictator. He dictated what went on the curb. He controlled the people. He controlled me, and he he was the guy that let it go on, why it went on.
Now, you mentioned Mr. Floyd.
Correct.
Where was this individual you referred to as Mr. Floyd?
Can you please repeat that?
Sure. Where was this individual that you have referred to as Mr. Floyd?
Mr. Floyd, again, was on this side of the car, angled down by the tire area in this area, but on this side of the car.
And at this time, prior to coming into court, did we show you a photograph of the officer with Mr. Floyd on the ground?
Can you please repeat that?
Yeah, prior to court today, did we show you a photograph of that officer with Mr. Floyd on the ground?
That is correct.
And that photograph, did it fairly depict what you saw when you got there first?
That is correct.
Okay. Your Honor, to that extent, I would offer Exhibit 17.
Any objection? 17.
Now I'm going to show Exhibit 17 on the screen, and so this is what you saw when you came to that area on the curb there.
Yeah, this is what I saw, and the only reason why he's looking at me right now is because I told him it was a blood choke.
Okay, we will come back to that in a little bit. When you were there, was Mr. Floyd able to speak?
That is correctly. He was speaking in a distress way.
And what kinds of things led you to believe he was distressed?
He was vocalizing it to the officer. He said, "My stomach hurt. I can't breathe. My head hurts. I want my mom." Yeah, those are the things that he repeatedly said. He wanted to get out the car. He said he's sorry for what he did. He pleaded with my mans and told him, like, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't pretty much have to die."
And so did you feel like you could have walked closer from this vantage point on the curb?
I could have. I felt that way in a way, but it was a fear factor as well.
And at this time, so you had seen Officer Tao, and you had seen this officer in Exhibit 17
Correct.
on Mr. Floyd. Did you see any other officers at the scene at that time?
No, I did not.
All right. And so this in Exhibit 17 shows the vantage point you had, the view you had from where you were standing.
Correct. I only had that side view of the two officers and the shoulder length of George Floyd's head. Nothing else.
And when you were in this location, can you describe for the jurors what you saw about Mr. Floyd, how he appeared? Well, let me back up just for a second. You've used Mr. Floyd's name. Did you know him at the time?
I did not know Mr. Floyd at all. No real connection.
So you're using his name because you've learned since then who he is.
Correct. Can't go too many places without not knowing his name or seeing his face in Minnesota.
So when you're in this location, you first come up and you're seeing him, he's able to speak.
Correct.
Can you describe what you saw of Mr. Floyd's condition as time progressed here?
As time progressed, so when I first arrived on the scene, Mr. Floyd was vocalizing his sorriness and his pain and his distress that he was going through. The more that the knee was blocked on his neck and shimmies were going on, the more you seen Floyd fade away and slowly fade away, and like the fish in a bag, you seen his eyes slowly, pale out and again slowly roll to the back of his eyes. And so this is what I seen, this is what I heard, and that's how, what it was. Like, he was going through distress because of the knee, and he vocalized it, that I can't breathe, I need to get up, and I'm sorry. And his eyes slowly rolled to the back of his head. You seen the blood coming out of his nose. You heard him tell him before he stopped speaking that my stomach hurts, and those most of the times is the last bowel movement of your life. So from there on, he was lifeless. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He didn't have no life in him, no more on his body movements.
During that time period, did you notice anything about his breathing that was significant to you?
Yes, just like in MMA, you could tell when someone gets tired, or you could tell when someone's getting choked out, or things like that. His breathing was getting tremendously heavy and tremendously harder for him to breathe, and you actually could hear him. You could see him struggling to actually gasp for air while he was trying to breathe. And I mean, he barely could move while he was trying to get air.
As you were standing there, did others gather around?
Correct. At the moment, I was the most vocalist person out there pleading for Floyd's life because I felt like it was definitely in the wrong. And there was, at one point in time, a medic came on scene, and she spoke on checking pulse, what made me even go even more harder because I heard it, and then I registered in it like, oh, you do need to check his pulse. Oh, he is not moving. Like, oh, you just killed this man, you know? And so her expertise was like, look, he's fading away. You need to check his pulse. She's asking him multiple times. I'm asking him multiple times. No one checked his pulse.
Do you remember Officer Tao saying anything during this time period?
Yeah, he did what American does, and he blamed it on drugs for being a black man on the ground.
Let me just
Sorry about that. Yeah.
What did he say about drugs?
He said, "This is what drugs do to you," and I replied, "This is not what drugs do to you."
So, did that Officer Tao saying that help the situation?
No, it didn't. If I'll be honest with you, it pissed me off more because that wasn't the case. You know what I mean?
So, when you were there, seeing this, did you draw on your training and experience in wrestling and mixed martial arts to draw some conclusion about what this officer in Exhibit 17 was doing?
Can you go ahead and repeat that?
Yep, it's kind of a long question.
Yes, it was.
As you're standing there, seeing what you've described to the jury, did you draw on your training and experience in wrestling and mixed martial arts to get an idea of what this officer was doing physically there?
Correct. Yeah, so like as I'm standing there and observing everything, before I even spoke, if you've seen the video, I watched what was going on, and as he's positioned here before I even spoke to the officer, I watched the position, one, of where the position of the neck or the knee was on the neck, you know, two, what body movements was going on while the knee was on the neck, and then three, what was the condition of George Floyd while he was going through this torture. One was that the neck was diagonal across the throat, which on a blood choke, you would tack the side of the neck, you know, and which you're in a Kimura or side chokes or things like that, you want to attack the side of the neck to cut the circulation of the breathing from your person. And then to get the choke tighter, you hit different shimmies, which I felt the officer on top was shimmying to actually get the final choke in while he was on top to get the kill choke, because a side choke or a blood choke can ultimately turn into death, and that's what we've seen here.
And so,
Jury is to disregard the last statement by the witness.
just for the record, the last statement about leading to
The last statement. Proceed.
And so, did you think, based on your training experience, that this looked like a blood choke?
That is correct.
And did you say that to the officer?
That's correct.
And how did he respond when you said that to him?
He looked at me right here. It's the only time he looked at me. When I said it was a blood choke, it's the only time he looked up. We looked each other dead in our eyes. Yeah, and when I said it, he acknowledged it.
And
like we're looking at each other right here.
okay.
The last statement is sustained as non-responsive.
And so when
question.
I'm sorry. And Mr. Williams, from that vantage point depicted in Exhibit 17, that officer, do you see that person present in the courtroom today?
That's correct. He's standing right there.
In order to ask the record to reflect he's identified the defendant?
It will so reflect.
When you were there at the scene, did you at one point tell the officers that you were trained at the academy?
That is correct.
And what did you mean by academy?
A shortening for the Mixed Martial Arts Academy.
Now, as this was happening, did other people eventually come to the scene?
That is correct.
And I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 184. Before we put that up, Your Honor, I would offer Exhibit 184. It's not on there. All right, we'll come back to that later. When this crowd was there, do you recall roughly how many people were there?
No, I do not.
At any time, did you hear anybody threaten to harm the officers?
No. Well, I don't want to say harm. I mean, some kid came, the kid that might have called the police, or I'm not sure exactly from when I talked to him after the situation, but he did come out once he realized what was going on, and he almost like tried to rile the crowd back up, and I just kind of was like, nah, just chill out. It's too late. You can't do that. Just go back inside. So that was the only incident I recall of.
And when you did that to him, did he go back inside?
Yeah, he went back inside crying. He was a younger kid.
Okay. Now, earlier you mentioned the term shimmy.
Correct.
Which I've just been spelling S-H-I-M-M-Y. Good enough?
Yeah, good enough. I never gave it a spelling of it, but yeah, shimmy.
And so that's a move that you learned in your training for mixed martial arts holds.
That is correct.
And what's the purpose of doing a shimmy?
To get the choke tighter, to close the gap of the air between your arm and the neck.
And were there times that you saw things that you thought you recognized as a shimmy by this officer on Mr. Floyd?
That is definitely correct.
Your Honor, just for the record, we are going to show a portion of a video that I think counsel will stipulate to its admissibility. We'll lay full foundation for it tomorrow, and I'm only going to show a portion of it for this witness today. And that's Exhibit 15.
Any objection to the partial? Exhibit 15 will be received, subject to later foundation.
Now, Mr. Williams, you did not take any video at the scene yourself.
That is correct. No video.
And we had an opportunity to show you a video earlier. And did that video fairly and accurately depict what you were seeing there?
From a live angle, yes. From myself, yes.
All right. What I'm going to do is play a portion of Exhibit 15, and it's the time period roughly when you are there. And while we play it, I would just ask that you explain to the jury the things that you saw you would consider a shimmy, and just sort of explain how what it is that you're seeing to make you think that.
Correct.
Is that all right?
Yes.
All right. So we'll do Exhibit 15 starting at 44 seconds.
Let me breathe, please, man. I've been trying to help out with you. So let me breathe with this. Man.
So now he just did it right there. You see his foot is on his toe is pointed down, and you will see a small gesture in his back foot like this. And that's just the pressure you push more down between his knee, George's head, and the concrete, and cut off circulation.
All right, and we'll continue on that, please.
Yeah, he just did it again.
And we saw that movement there that moves
Correct.
the knee on
And
the
his foot, this time his foot came up off the ground, so no foot on the ground, so all the pressure is on his neck.
And you're talking about the foot on the same leg as the knee.
Yep, so correct. So it's the same foot on the knee. So it's like this is a choke here. So this is, for instance, my neck here. And then for me to close this, I shimmy, I shimmy, I shimmy, I shimmy, I shimmy. And now I close the choke on the side of the neck.
And just for the
Sorry about
record,
shimmy.
sorry,
Yeah.
just for the record, you're demonstrating with your arms. How
Yep, I'm demonstrating with my arms. So that's choke, from neck here, and for instance, my neck would be from here, so I would have this across from here, and then I'm closing it off here, pretty much the angle of his knee, and then every time I'm shimmying, I'm getting this right here to close the gap closer within my neck, and it's the same way that you can do without having the neck across here.
So we'll continue on with the video then.
What do you want?
I can breathe.
See, they did it again. They did it again. They did it again.
Bro, get up, get in the car, man.
I will.
Get up, get in the car.
It's just a small gestures, and then you'll see his shoulders slowly swag. Sorry.
Okay, so,
Oh, sorry about that.
yeah. So what we'll do is we'll wait. Now we've stopped the video at this portion, and if you could just explain what you're seeing here
Correct.
that leads you to believe this is a shimmy type move.
So explain now.
Correct.
Okay, cool. So the gestures and the movements is from his shoulders and the top, and he's just doing it with his knees. Not it's not an actual choke on with the hands. Now he's actually putting the same pressure as you would with your neck. And like I said, every time his shoulder is moving, he's pushing that pressure down on his neck from the shoulders to the knees, all the way from this angle. And you will see his shoulder shift, and then you'll see the bottom of his knee shift, and his foot come off. The one time he took his foot off the ground and put multiple pressure. Now his foot's not on the ground. He's driving off his far foot.
And, as you're seeing this, are you also seeing things on Mr. Floyd's face that you testified to earlier?
Correct.
All right. So let's continue with the video then.
Get up, get in the car.
Mama,
Get up and get in the car
Mama.
right.
I can't.
Get gave y'all the opportunity to get in, bro. I told you can't win.
My knee.
You can't
My neck.
win, man.
I'm through.
I know you didn't never you didn't listen.
That's the food. My stomach hurts. My neck hurts. Everything hurts.